Okay. Hello everyone, and welcome to the third presentation in the Analog Astronaut Field Notes series presented by Flight Ready Systems. This is just a disclaimer that this webinar series is for our guests to present personal stories and inspiration during this really unique time in history. This webinar series is not intended for anything beyond that. I am Dr. Sian Proctor. I am the CEO of Flight Ready Systems, and I'm really excited to be here today to share with you my personal motto, which is Space to Inspire, and really the story of how I ended up getting there. So to give you a little bit of background about me, I am a geoscientist. I guess you could say, I've been teaching at South Mountain Community College for the last 21 years. I have a degree in environmental science, master's in geology. I really teach geology classes, sustainability classes, and recently I've started teaching more planetary and life in the universe types of classes. I consider myself an explorer and science communicator, and I've been very fortunate that I've been able to go and travel all around the world and do some really unique things. But in the past 10 years, I've had the opportunity to get more involved in human spaceflight research and training by becoming an analog astronaut, which means I basically like living in Moon and Mars simulations. So I want to ask a poll, since NASA just announced the astronaut selection program, and in fact, it just closed, I want to know how many in the audience got the opportunity to apply. And so let's just take a moment. I'm going to set the timer, and we will, if I can set this timer, well, we'll just go for a minute and see how many people applied for the astronaut program. Specifically this round, the 2020 astronaut selection program. And I know that the majority here, because this is mainly Embry-Riddle students, we closed off the public, is going to be on the no side for this. And so I'll give another 10 seconds for voting, and we'll see if anybody else is a yes. So I would just want to say that I voted and I fall into the no category. I know the one yes is probably Ryan in the room. I am a no. And the reason why is I turned 50 2 weeks ago, and I realized that I'm looking forward to retiring in a few years and not having to do what must be one of the most rewarding yet mentally demanding jobs in the world, being an astronaut. But when I was a kid, I wanted to be a military aviator and eventually become the shuttle commander, because who doesn't have that dream at some time when they're young? And so my love of space started at birth. I was born on Guam because my father was working at the NASA tracking station on Guam during the Apollo missions. I was actually born 8.5 months after Neil Armstrong took those famous first steps. So I consider myself to be a moon baby. I actually grew up with Neil Armstrong's autograph to my dad. So in the lower right corner, that says, "To Ed, thanks for all the help, Neil Armstrong, Apollo 11," because he came to Guam after the Apollo 11 mission. And then my dad had all of these amazing certificates from his Apollo days, which I inherited and I have on my office wall today. But things kind of took a turn when I was a teenager. My father passed away when I was 19, and some other things. I got glasses, which meant that I wasn't going to be a military aviator back in those days. So I gave up on ever being an astronaut or even doing anything in human space flight. I went off to get my degrees, and I ended up getting my dream job in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been a geoscience professor for 21 years, and I've been fortunate in my career as a geoscientist. I've been able to travel around the world, and I even got my pilot's license, a gift to myself after I got my PhD. But I went for a good 20 years, never even giving the astronaut program another thought. And I didn't know how you became an astronaut. And then in 2008, I got an email from a friend that basically said, NASA's looking for astronauts, you should apply. Now keep in mind, at that time, I was 38 years old. And so it was kind of a shock email where I was like, what? And then I opened up the selection process, and I realized that, I had my PhD, I had my pilot's license, I was scuba certified, I didn't speak any Russian, but I had a cultural experience from traveling around the world. And so here I was, in my late 30s, and faced with the potential of achieving this seemingly impossible childhood dream of becoming an astronaut. But one of the things that I had to do before I could move forward was I had to reconcile this idea, this stigma of only being just a community college professor. Why would they choose me? And I know a lot of the students, as you go through your careers, you're going to come to those kinds of terms, what are called impostor syndrome, where you have the skills and the knowledge and the ability to do the task, but you don't often have the confidence to take the leap, that leap forward to apply for something that you really want, because you think, oh, they'll never select me. And so just so you know, you're not alone. I went through that because, like I said, I feel like, oh, well, I'm just a college professor. Why would they select me? But when I thought about all of the qualifications and the legacy of what my father did for NASA, having no degree at all, I thought, you know what? This is something where put my name in the hat and let them make the decision whether I'm qualified or not. And I did. And what that meant, that out of thousands of candidates, I ended up being a finalist for the 2009 NASA astronaut selection. And that meant I got down to a yes/no phone call. That call came from astronaut Sunita Williams, and that's her in the picture with me. It was a no phone call, because if it was a yes phone call, I'd be wearing that blue jumper right talking to you. But even though I wasn't selected for the astronaut program, I emerged from that experience fundamentally transformed. I was no longer the same person I was before I applied. I was now reconciling my childhood dream and really beginning to re-embrace my love of space in ways I never had imagined over 10 years ago before I got that email from a friend. Because now I was able to find ways to expand and basically to explore space in new ways I didn't even know was possible. And so when we think about the word space, it's really kind of interesting, because I realize now that I've been chasing space my entire life, but didn't realize to the extent that I was doing that until I went through that selection process, the NASA selection process, and started to focus on my past and all the things that had brought me to that point in my life. And so space is this really unique word because we can think about it in so many different ways. Take a moment and think about the word space and how many different types of space there are. And what I want you to do is I want you to use the chat, and I want you to write down different types of space. And Aaron, or can you actually, Ryan, will you monitor and just kind of shout out some of the types of space that people are writing? For instance, I'll give you one: personal space. That's a type of space. So what types of space can you think of?
Public space, workspace, headspace, negative space, outer space, mental space, space-time, physical space, creative space.
Yeah, so you can see that there, when we
Meter
start
space.
thinking about the word space, there is just so many things that we can think of. Like you're saying, personal space, outdoor space or open space, emotional space, I don't think was mentioned, creative space, virtual space. And so what I want you to think about now is, what type of space do you crave or need? And I want you to fill that out in the poll. And so I don't have all of them, but out of the ones that are listed, which one is one that you're like, I can't live without this type of space. I know it, it feeds my soul. I just have to have it. All right, we've got people voting. We can see what's coming. Okay, we've got 16 seconds, 15 more for voting, so get your votes in. Look at all the changes. I love it. Okay, voting is going to end now. And so we can see that most of us really are outer space people. And when I heard that word space, I would naturally think outer space. But then I thought about that. Outer space is a place that I've never been. And chances of going are incredibly small. And so when I think about space and the space that I need, and this craving or love for something that I get to see in the night sky, but don't get to experience physically, is really interesting. And so in 2013, so this was 3 years, I got the no call in 2009. So this is 4 years later. In 2013, actually, the call came out in 2012. In 2012, there was an announcement for a new Mars simulation happening on the Big Island of Hawaii, and they needed volunteers. So I jumped at the chance. And that's how I became an analog astronaut. I actually took this photo of the high seas habitat at night because I love looking up at the stars, outer space, and just dreaming of being able to experience that, to leave Earth. So for a long time, space for me represented that, this desire to go beyond Earth. And it wasn't until I was living in this Mars simulation that I actually began to think about space differently. This was my high seas crew. We lived together for 4 months. And NASA is very interested in many aspects of human spaceflight exploration, including crew cohesion. So when we think about it, how do you select a group of people who can handle living in tight spaces for a long period of time without wanting to kill each other? Now, I found this very intriguing. Not the notion of killing each other, but our perception of space. And I realized that how we think about our space is extremely important. And I started to change my focus of my quest for outer space to space on Earth. And so being in that confined environment literally helped me start to think about space differently because we were in a confined space environment. And so I thought, okay, I'm chasing outer space, but maybe there's a space on Earth that is really important. And if we can figure out how to get along and survive and thrive in this extreme environment we call outer space, then maybe there's a way we can get along, survive, and thrive on this starship we call Earth. And that got me thinking about what type of space actually makes a difference in people's lives and why. So when you sit there and you think about all those spaces that we listed, is there a space, and I'm not talking outer space, but a space on Earth that actually makes a difference in people's lives at why and how? And that's kind of fundamentally where a big shift happened for me. And I realized that the space I was seeking was right here. the space I inhabit, everything within one arm's length of me. And so when we think about this whole idea, and there's me, I'm at the, this was in 2020 at high seas again. I'm on an EVA and I'm just sitting there kind of thinking about my space. And I have my arms out because that is the space that I realized is the most unique space. And then because it's the space where transformation happens. It's all about me and the individual things I do and the choices I make to improve both myself and the world around me. And that makes this a really powerful, unique space. So I've been chasing space my entire life, but didn't realize that the most important space was right here in front of me. And I told myself that I was going to use my unique space to try to inspire somebody every single day. And that's kind of why I'm doing this webinar here, to inspire. I realized that it took me 50 years, but I realized that that's my superpower, harnessing my space to inspire those within my reach. So now when I think about reaching out and talking to you, how are you using your unique space? So take a minute and think about that. When I think about it, I think, you know, there will never be another you, and the energy and the vision you bring to this world is fundamentally unique. If you focus on using the strengths and talents that define your space and focus on helping and inspiring those within your reach, then all those dreams of chasing space in whatever form they may be will manifest in ways you never even imagined. And so when I get up and talk, you know, I tell myself these 12 things to try to inspire myself and think about this unique space that encompasses me. We have the power. You have the power to transform the world around you. And I think if we collectively used our space to make a difference, strive for equity, promote diversity, be inclusive, and take the time to connect with those who are least like you, then maybe we just might be able to change the world. So take a moment and imagine what you could do to make a difference for yourself and or others using your space. When I think about that, think about the interactions you have, the words you use, the time you spend on tasks, your commitment level to yourself. Are you 100% committed? Like, are you in 100%? You are an agent of change, harnessing the power of your space to make a positive difference in this world. And the thing about it is you're already doing it, but do you recognize it? Do you own it? And use it for your full advantage every single day? That is what I'm striving for. That is my space to inspire. And I hope that has an impact or a way of thinking about space differently for you. Thank you. I also hope that you will use, you know, share with me your space to inspire, use hashtag. Coming up next week, Ryan, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Next week, we have astronaut Nicole Stott presenting all the knots, astronauts, aquanauts, artistonauts, and it should be pretty exciting. Nicole is a very dear friend of Embry-Riddle and the world, of course, and she's going to be our next guest speaker. So I hope you're looking forward to that, and we'll keep creating these events for everyone, even after the semester ends.
And I think I was able to get, I kind of rushed through a little bit, but we're still a few minutes before 9:30. So the next thing is questions. And I'll turn on my Mars feed so you can see.
Yeah,
Hi, everybody.
I think you could probably hide your end presentation, and that way they'll see you as the full size on the screen.
Stop sharing.
Yeah. And people can go to speaker view. So right now they need to request to be unmuted, or they raise your hands, or you can type your questions in the chat. So please, if you have anything, I will do my best to unmute you so you can just ask directly. If you're not sure how to raise your hand, then you can say, I have a question in the chat. If you're not sure how to use the chat, then it's time for a Zoom lesson. There's a chat button on the bottom. Okay, so Jacob has one. Let's unmute Jacob. Let's find you in the list. That's the only problem, right? Is finding the right person quickly. 1 second, Jacob. Unmute.
Hi, how are you guys doing today?
Good. Hi, Jacob.
So first I'd like to say hello. Also, I did, Sian, sorry. I did actually watch your presentation at Space Vision this year.
Oh, yeah.
Which was nice as well. So I just had one question. So as probably most people in this chat, we all want to become astronauts. So that is my main goal as well. And I was just wondering, is there anything in particular that, since obviously you became very close to become an astronaut, is there anything that you kind of thought about and you realized, oh, if I maybe did this or put more time to this one particular area, that would have gave me a little bit more edge?
Yep. That is a really good question, because hindsight. So one of the things that I did was basically I was at Goddard Space Flight Center, and when the no phone call comes in, and you basically have a meltdown, right? Because it's a yes, no to your dream job. And when that no comes, the first thing you do is you question everything that, why didn't they select me? And I formed a plan. I enrolled in University of North Dakota's space program because I was going to get a master's in space studies, even though I already had a PhD. I was going to get my advanced scuba. I was going to get my, advanced pilot license and all of these things. And I really tore myself up about it. And then I went back to, whoa, and I had to stop. And I said, this is crazy. Why am I made it to like less than 1% people get down to the yes and no phone call. And keep in mind, up in there from 16 to 38, I didn't even give the astronaut selection a thought. I just lived my life and I did the things that were important to me. And that's what NASA liked. That's what my friend saw. He saw what he thought would make a good astronaut and sent me the email. So I think, when it comes to framing your whole life to this one task of going to space, I think that's a good task to have and a good sight. But I also think that you should be doing the things that you love, becoming well-rounded, being a good person. And that's why concentrating on this, your space and how you can use your space to inspire is so important, and focusing on your strengths and talents, because that's what NASA wants to see. They want to see a well-rounded, grounded, good human being that gets along with others, but also is talented and you don't have to be extremely gifted in science, technology, engineering, and math. I was a C student, okay? So you need to get through, but you don't have to be MIT to get there. You just have to be passionate. And that's what I think they saw in me, was my passion and love for not just aerospace and space exploration, but really I'm a geoscientist for the Earth and traveling the world and communicating and doing all those things and playing sports and staying healthy and engaged in well-being. And so I think that, especially since you're starting off now in your career, is find your passions and creativity and dive deep into that. And if it's space exploration, that's great. Don't get into that, but really do it because you love it, and that'll shine through when NASA's looking for astronauts.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That was very inspiring. Thank you.
We've got 4 questions popped up in the chat. So start with Mary Liz. And now you guys can unmute yourselves. I trust you.
Thank you. So I'm just curious because I've been following the private space travel revolution, let's call it. and we're about to witness the first commercial crew astronauts go up, and then we're about to witness more private citizen astronauts going to space. And I'm just curious how you feel, if you've done any thinking on, you know, how it will change us, perhaps our perspective, how it will change humanity as more people that are not, they don't quite fit into the astronaut list, you know, of requirements, but poets and artists and different people going to space now, coming back with those experiences.
I love it. I think that, you know, democratizing space, opening it up to everybody. I mean, we're really on the frontier of where we were 100 years ago with flight. The first flights with the Wright brothers, you know, soon afterwards, it wasn't too long afterwards that the first kid flew on, I think it was a cousin or niece of the Wright brothers on a plane. And so we've become a lot more risk averse to those kinds of things. But I'm looking forward to when anybody who, the getting to space becomes affordable and we can get as many people to experience that as possible, even down to kids and things like that. I think that that is a unique opportunity for us to really provide something new to humanity. And I'm really, you know, we've got people living year round now in space. So it's only a matter of time before we have people living year round on the moon and then year round on Mars. And when I say not necessarily one person, but people constantly there, and we'll be shuffling them in and out. And that's an exciting time. And I hope that I live long enough to see the first footsteps on Mars. I know that the moon is coming back again with the first female, and that female is alive today, and that's exciting. And the person who will probably be the first person to step on Mars is alive right now, and that's exciting. And so lots of good things to come. But for me, I didn't apply for the NASA astronaut selection process because I'm really holding out for commercial. I think that as an old lady that they'll send me up.
Same, that's where I went. Thank you so much.
All right, we've got Suman next. Can you unmute to ask your question?
Sure. Hi, thank you guys. And so actually my question is very related to the last one. So you know, obviously, you know, I'm also getting there in age and everything else. And we all have, you know, day jobs, right? So those of us who are really interested in the space program, and if you had to give us, you know, guidance on one or two areas where we can actually contribute the most. So to give you an example, I have a STEM degree, you know, I actually read up about the, you know, space program as much as I can. But if there are places where, like, you know, citizen astronauts like myself, or, you know, citizen wannabe astronauts like myself can actually contribute the most, to love to get your perspective on it.
Yeah, well, you know, that's one of the things that's been great is that when I went through the selection process, the term analog astronaut wasn't even a thing. And now there are moon and Mars simulations around the world that help do really good research to contribute to human spaceflight. And so being able to go and do that, and to participate in things like Project Possum, and to get your, you know, be an explorer of Earth so that you can be an explorer of the moon and Mars and beyond. And so I think that any of those ways of taking and getting involved in activities around human spaceflight will help you, not only for your resume of, you know, trying to be selected, whether it's commercial or for NASA, but it's also just helping here on Earth. The food study that I did made me rethink food sustainability. I should say let me take that back. The 2013 High Seas mission I did that was for 4 months was funded by NASA to investigate food strategies for long duration space flight. And it fundamentally changed the way that I think about food. And I'm in my little, you know, Meals for Mars space chef thing because I'm actually going to be presenting on that coming up for a couple of things. But those kinds of things can help, get you to know yourself and how good of a crewmate you can be, but it also will allow you to contribute to the research that's happening and the advancement of human spaceflight.
Thank you so much.
Can I add something? Can I jump in, Sai?
Yeah, of course.
Hey, Shuman. So what I would add as well is, and it totally jumps on the back of what Sian just said, is that research is critical in supporting human spaceflight. So everything, like all the STEM background that you have or anybody has, like you can be proposing research that supports that, and then take that research into those analogs and test them out. And I think like there are lots of avenues, not just through NASA, but through NSF, like there's government funding, there's private funding all over the place to conduct this type of research. It's using the things that you're passionate about and the skills that you have to develop technology that could help the thing that you want to contribute to, commercial spaceflight, NASA, like ISS research, whatever it is, but like coming up with that's how you can really use the skills that you have now and be up and running quickly.
Yeah, and like for me, it's about taking that technology that NASA's using for like food sustainability and bringing it back to Earth and saying, hey, we should be doing this, to help out in crises like this, freeze-dried food, or to help in disaster relief and things like that, and to cut down on energy usage and food waste. And so thinking about ways that solving for space solves for Earth is also another fun way to think about things too.
We got two more questions, and then we'll see where we're at. So Lee is next on deck. Lee, are you able to unmute?
Yeah. Hi, Sian. It's good to see
Hi,
you
Lee.
again.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed your presentation. I liked your list about mastering your personal space and the space around you. And one of the points that you had on there was achieving flow within your space.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about how to achieve a balance between realizing that flow, which some people might not understand that term, but it's like almost an effortless mastery of your skills and of your talents. But how do you achieve a balance between that and also furthering those skills and talents and pursuing something more?
Well, that's a really good question. I'm actually at the beginning of that in my career now. I kind of found high performance and flow recently. And so if those of you guys that don't know it, it's just this whole idea of how do you become a high performing, whether it's athlete or scientist or something like that, to the point where you enter a state of flow where, like Lee was saying, to some extent it's effortless, but your concentration is so high that even time tends to melt away. And so I'm reading a book or listening to an audiobook called Mapping Cloud 9. And that's kind of where I've been thinking a lot about this. But it gets to the point where, again, I think this is following your passion. So a lot of people who get into high performance and flow have a passion that they are committed to 100%. And when they're chasing that thread, that rabbit hole, that's when they're in this kind of high performance flow state. And so Lee, I think that I have a lot of a huge amount of trouble with this because I'm eclectic. I'm a jack of all opportunities, master of life skills. I dabble here, I dabble there. And so for me, it's been a lot more challenging. Do know times when I start to feel that I'm in flow. And that's usually when I'm doing an EVA for, during a Mars simulation or moon simulation, when I get to scrambling over dangerous rocky terrain and going into lava tubes and things like that, that's when I'm zoned in. And so I like to look for more experiences like that so that I can continue to develop my flow in that state. And I think that that's what you need to do too, is to kind of figure out, you know, when am I at that peak performance where I'm so concentrated. Another example is when I got my pilot's license. By far, that was the most emotionally, physically, mentally challenging thing that I ever did, was when I first soloed a plane, because you're terrified you're going to kill yourself. But the control of being able, like, I remember literally shaking on my solo, walking out to the plane, and then it kicked in, all of my training and everything, and I was in the zone, and I flew, did everything that I did, landed, and then I was like, whoa, how much time passed? It was like, I didn't even realize it because I was so like focused in the moment. And so those are the moments that we're talking about when we're talking about peak performance and achieving flow. I hope that answered your question.
We've got 2 more questions. One is both from students, and then we'll see where we're at. We'll probably wrap up after those 2. So Abby has asked, because she cannot unmute because it's loud where she is. Her question is, what is the most important thing you learned from the Mars simulation?
Oh, good question. I've done a couple of them, but the very first one was pacing, because that was the longest one I did, was 4 months. And so if you're thinking about long duration space flight, it really is, if you're a person who can do the kind of the same thing again and again and again without getting bored, that's probably to your advantage to some extent. But if you're someone like me who really loves to dabble in this and that, it's really important that, because you don't have access to outside stuff, you really have to pace yourself. And so I was lucky because I ran a cooking contest while I was in the habitat, and I was able to, where I was cooking with different crew members, and I spaced it out. So I had something that I love to do, and it was spaced out, and yet it was also, you know, research and things that kept me busy for the entire 4 months. So I think time management and being able to time manage in that type of situation is really important, but also knowing your tics of like what irritates you, because crew cohesion is so important, and how to get along with your roommates in such a tight quarter. So having empathy and emotional IQ, you know, emotional intelligence, of not only for yourself and how to regulate yourself, but also to be empathetic and understand, you know, when your roommates need some time, or, you know, they need you to kind of interact, and getting to know their personality so that you can get along really well. Ryan and Aaron, do you have anything to add to that, since you've also?
No, I mean, that was awesome. So yeah, it's just fully agree. So we've got one more question from another student. Kartik, you're up.
So I was wondering, like, since all of you guys have been on analogs, is there like any place where if I want to go do an analog mission, I can go to that place and be like, hey, I want to do an analog mission. Can you set me up? That kind of stuff.
Well, a lot of them, they have their own application process. If you go to the Analog Astronaut website, www.analogastronaut.com, you'll be able to see at least a list of all of the ones that's not necessarily up to date, but at least gives you an idea of their website and where you go to get more information. And a lot of times it's about reaching out to those specific places. So if you want to do MDRS, you would go, that's the Mars Desert Research Station, and they have a call for applications every year. And you can apply as a group where you and some of your friends get together to go and do a simulation, or you can apply as an individual. And the same thing goes for high seas. It's under private management. And so they put out calls for people to be able to participate. And then there's HERA, which is NASA. And NASA doesn't just have HERA, but they have some other ones that they do in partnership. And again, they have a whole analog site off of NASA that you can Google, but it's also on the Analog Astronaut website, and that'll give you information. Project Possum is another one where it's not necessarily it's spaceflight training, citizen science astronaut stuff, but again, it's good. And me, Ryan, and Aaron have all gone through it, so it's good. Again, good training that you can engage in while you're pursuing this.
Are there like any specific qualifications you need for the thing?
It all depends on the solicitation. If it's NASA funded, then it's going to be highly regulated towards the astronaut selection criteria to some extent. And so here, you're going to have medical, you're going to have interviews, you're going to have all those things. If it's NDRS and you and a group that put together, as long as you have the money, money talks. Same thing with high seas. You can buy yourself an analog, and you can bring a poet with you. You can bring, different people with you, whatever you want to make up your crew, but you still have to do research that is relevant. They don't want you to just go on vacation. So in your package, you still have to put together the science and the relevance to human spaceflight exploration. But it doesn't mean you can't have artists with you. When I was in the first high seas habitat, Kate Green, she's got a physics background, she's got a master's in physics, but she turned into a science writer. And that's what she does full time. And so she was on my crew for 4 months. And we're actually going to have Kate in a couple of weeks. And so something to look forward to.
I just put in the chat where you would go apply for to be in a HERA mission. So if anyone wants to take a look at that, that's the NASA facility. And they describe it, basically you just send them an email. It looks like with your resume.
A friend of mine just applied for the Russia one that's about to go, and she's a finalist for that. And so she's here in the United States, but she grew up in Russia, speaks Russian. So she's like, oh, I'll apply. And so there are analogs all over the world. And so.
Yeah, I was just thinking too, to add the high seas habitat in Hawaii, they have actually different groups will go in. And I think, Sai, you touched on this a little bit, but I know the European Space Agency they do the Euro Moon Mars series, and they're running missions all the time, and they're looking for people to come in and be a part of the mission, and not necessarily proposing research, but participating in research and living in the habitat for 2 weeks. And then some are longer than that. They'll do longer missions. But
yeah, they've got a sort of a month-long ones coming in, I believe.
Yeah. So it pops up quite often that they need people to participate, but keep in mind that you have to pay to participate. It's not like these are all funded opportunities. But that's something that you can raise funds for or apply for grants to get the funding for, that kind of thing.
Sounds like we need to do a summer abroad program in one of the habitats, but like for a whole month in high seas or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, the Canary Islands, or, going to Portugal.
I'm trying not to think about this summer too much because, I'm very excited about that program, but I'm fully aware that it may or may not happen, but it hasn't been stopped yet. So I'm just, sitting back and waiting, see what happens. Yep. But yeah, there's lots of places to apply for these. And you can always ask me and your fellow students for, who's interested in these opportunities. The ones at the Mars Desert Research Station and most of them that at high seas now are 2-week rotations. So they're reasonable. I've been in a bunch of them during grad school, so I've missed weeks at a time. So it's possible to be able to do your work at the same time as being involved with these research projects. But it definitely helps to have an idea of what you'd want to actually be testing in the field, or why you need to be there versus not being there. That definitely increases the chances. I know that a lot of universities will have like robotic testing or something in the field as part of their mission, or specific studies that they're carrying out.
Okay.
Well, awesome. Do you want the final thoughts here, Doctor, to wrap this up?
No, just again, I think that lessons learned from me is that I still love outer space and want to go, but again, this is the most important space right here, one arm's reach, what you can do for yourself and humanity. And so, space to inspire.
Great. Thank you, Sai.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sai. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording here, and I'm sure a couple of us can hang out for just a bit longer as well.
Oh, I will say Yuri's Saturday. If you haven't tuned in yet, check out Yuri's night.
Worldwide broadcast starting at, I think, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, April 11th, 2020. Just Google it. You'll find it. You'll find the links. All right, take care.
Bye.